The signing of the Companies and Allied Matters Act 2020 into law by President Muhammadu Buhari on August 7, 2020 is supposed to herald Nigeria's most significant business legislation after 3 decades. Some provisions in the new CAMA 2020 have caused a debate, despite the federal government's narrative that the act will promote ease of doing business and reduce regulatory hurdles. One government agency at the forefront of the new act is the Corporate Affairs Commission, which has been given details and explanations to concerned clauses.
The powers under CAMA are not even as extensive as what we have under the Churches Act. So this is my explanation for this. It's not targeted at any particular group, but our laws have to be consistent with best practice. And as I have said, individuals, associations have a right to register or not to register. If you don't want to operate in line with CAMA, then don't register. Deal with your members as an individual.
Under the new act, the section states that religious bodies and charity organizations will now be strictly regulated by the Registrar General of the Corporate Affairs Commission and the Supervising Minister. Section 839 states that the Commission can suspend the trustees of an association and appoint an interim manager to run the affairs. But the Christian Association of Nigeria has rejected the act, describing it as unacceptable, urging the federal government to stop the implementation of the law until the religious institutions are exempted from it. However, the new CAMA has other reforms that will tone down regulatory hurdles for businesses and associations. But with the issues raised so far, questions are, what will be the next line of action from the federal government amid the controversies trailing the new CAMA Act?
What can be done is that whatever the proposals for amendment may be, whatever the views of the church leadership may be, regarding the question of how the trustees and where there are interim trustees or whatever can be managed, that should be put into proposals that can be brought before the National Assembly, before the National Assembly leadership, for a consideration of amendments to the law. That is a process which is entirely open, and I believe that that's a process that ought to be pursued.
Welcome back. Mr. Femi Atoyebi, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, joins us to weigh in on this CAMA 2020 controversy. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today on the program. Well, this that has been signed into law by the president received with mixed feelings. The business community are commending it, saying about time, but you also do have religious bodies who citing Section 839 saying, wait a minute, no way, this has got to be expunged from it. So do you think the mixed reactions are justified?
Thank you so much, first of all, for having me this morning. It's my pleasure coming on your show. Now, to your question, I think it's a welcome development, the CAMA 2020, from the perspective of the businessmen and I think professionals. I think it's a welcome development. It's long overdue. So I would say from that perspective, it's welcome. From the perspective of the church, which I understand watching you in the last few minutes, as well as reading the various comments in the social media, it does appear that a section of the church, and I stress that, a section, seems to have a problem with it. I am not exactly sure what the problem is. I know they are calling, from what you said, for a total suspension insofar as it concerns the church. But with the greatest respect to those who are making that call, I can't find the justification for it. There is no way, and there's nowhere in the world where there is law and order that a section of the society, whether be it church, a mosque, or whatever, will be exempted from the law. I haven't found that. I would personally not subscribe to it.
Well, it would be very interesting to know what your perspective is exactly about the specific provisions of that law, because for those who are even talking for now, it seems like it's only conversations as far as it concerns the church. Is it only about the church?
Well, thank you very much again. That's the precise point I just made now. If you look at the provisions of CAMA, particularly from section 823 to 839, CAMA 2020, provisions have been made for not-for-profit organizations. Some will probably call that as well NGO. It does mention classes that belong to that group. It says religious, academic, scientific, customs. Like if a club comes together, like a Ikoyi club and all of that, and they choose to register. And of course, it does mention religious bodies. But nowhere in that act was the church mentioned. No specific religious organization was mentioned. And so that's why I'm personally struggling with the objections by the church. It cannot be about the church alone. Of course, I do have my comments on the law itself, but to just simply sweep it aside and said the church should be exempted, I'm so sorry. I can't support that.
You know, you started by saying that, well, it wouldn't be fair to just, for the sake of a section of a society, now, repeal the law or say that, well, the law will not count when it comes to them. But interestingly, in that same act, it gives a provision that 1/5, especially in that section that has been quite controversial, that 1/5 of an organization, can protest in court and, raise issues. In fact, maybe go to court, or maybe it will be the CAC that will go to court. Basically also looking out for the minority in court. So, well, in the spirit of that law, it says, listen to the minority. And interestingly, it's not just a section of the church. I recall that SERAP also had issues with this law, for non-governmental organizations. And the challenge for them is, this law seems too strong in terms of, the leadership of those organizations. They say that some areas are vague, and they think that the government should not have that much authority in those organizations. So it's not just a section of the church, as it seems.
There are two distinct issues here. The argument of the leadership, or rather a section of the church, that is against the provisions of certain sections, particularly section 839, with reference to the powers conferred on the Registrar General. That's one aspect of it. There is the other aspect of the need for every organization, including the church, to be regulated. There are two different things. I seem to have a problem if anybody is arguing that the church shouldn't be regulated. But I do agree with them that from section 839 of CAMA 2020, it does appear that so much power has been conferred on the Registrar General to intervene in certain circumstances. I do agree with that. And so what I will expect any organization that is not particularly happy with the law as it stands is to approach the National Assembly and express its concerns as to the extent of the powers granted to the RG, Registrar General, and not to just say, sorry, we're not going to be regulated. So those are two different things. And I think they run in parallel. We must have regulation, but we must do it in such a way that someone will not wake up in the morning and decide that he wants to deal with any particular association, church, mosque, or some other organization that doesn't seem to be happy with. There is quite a good argument in that. I think the section is widely drafted, and I think we need to for this.
It's okay. We'll just allow you set up and, well, you could respond to this because the PFN, and I recall that you've worked with the PFN. So, I mean, there are two issues here. So you say that they should come up with all those issues and present them. But I recall that you once said that once a law is put in motion, it will be very difficult to repeal it. But then the issue about the public hearing, let's begin from there, because the PFN said, well, they raised some of these issues and they were not really dealt with.
All right. I'm not. If you were referring to the paper that I did last week, I didn't say it was. I didn't speak about repealing. Now I'm saying an amendment, not a repeal. Why would you repeal a law because a fraction of the society doesn't think it's good for them? Can you imagine if everybody raises an objection to one law or the other? Are we going to have laws in the country? So I was talking of, if they're asking for a repeal, I don't think it will happen. If they're asking for an amendment, I'm with them on that point in such a way that their fears would be allayed as to any misuse of the power conferred on the Registrar General or the Commission at large. So there are two different things between a repeal and an amendment. So I hope I have made that point clear. And as far as it concerns the public hearing, I'm hearing for the first time that they made presentation. So if they did, I think it's good at this point to put it out there to show people what their position was and why they thought government would abandon or jettison it. As far as the commentaries that I have received or have read in the public domain is concerned, I don't think CAN or PFN made a formal presentation at the public hearing.
Because, I mean, part of what they were saying is, okay, perhaps let's even listen to another group that I also think that they do have a challenge with this CAMA 2020 Act.
I think the government should step down the execution of this of this act for now. It should be stepped down. I think the stakeholders should be brought to the table and for the gray areas of it to be well defined so that trust can be built between the church and the government. Once that is done and the government understands clearly what the government is, the church rather understands what the government wants to do to make sure that this is not about control. If it's regulation, that is fine, and yes, the churches need to be regulated. I agree with that. The churches need to make some adjustments. Yes, but they can sit down at the table, and this is not something that this is a matter of spirituality. It's not something somebody is just going to come and bring an act and say they want to control the church. It will not work.
So from what they say there's mutual suspicion, and they think that the intendment of the drafters is a bit suspicious.
Well, not even the devil knows a man's intention, they say. So I'm not able to speak to what the intentions of government or the National Assembly is. As I've said before, I am a Christian and I'm a minister, and I will not stand and watch doing nothing if government decided to do such things. And I know it's not going to happen overnight if ever it is, if it's being planned at all. But that there is mistrust between both sides, maybe. But like the speaker you just showed the clips of, he's not talking, he made a good distinction between control and regulation. I will also not subscribe to government controlling any institution, not just the church, but particularly the church. I'll be averse to that. But I don't see control here. What I see is regulation. Again and again, I will repeat, there is concern for the sweeping provision of the powers conferred on the RG, and it needs to be revisited. But I honestly don't see why we should suspend it. This can be done immediately. We can make presentation right now, but I will always say, when you condemn a particular act of someone or a law, don't just condemn it. Come up with an alternative, something that you think is workable for both parties. So let those who are opposed to what it is right now come up with something they think will work and will be acceptable to government as well. As I said, I mean, what the gentleman who last spoke is saying is that we should now sit down and look at it together. That was the purpose of the public hearing. But I'm not going to say shut them out. No, we cannot shut them out. They have serious and genuine concerns. Let's sit down. In the meantime, before the Registrar General can do anything, you must have been you must have run foul of the provisions of the preceding subsection. If you do the right thing for now and you propose amendments to the relevant sections, which I support, I don't see any problem here. Most of at least the leaders that I know in the PFN are men of integrity, men of probity, and I don't think they will have problem with regulation. Control, they will, and I will. But regulation, as long as it is open, it is fair, I support it, and I think they will also support it.
Yeah, because I mean, I've not heard any one of them kick against the provisions concerning the business community. So they, from that, means that seems okay for them, including the churches as well. But I think the provisions of those sections, 839 moving forward, are where the challenges are. So maybe use of words when they say condemn the entire thing might have been because of their displeasure over those sections, provisions of sections 839 going forward. But then some of those who have also spoken, their comments are also out there, they just wonder, they think that the government seems to be copying the UK Charity Commission where they have to do with regulation of NGOs, and that is completely different in terms of the role that government plays there, completely different from here. In fact, they went on thinking that this is just a clear tactical maneuver to entrench the NGO regulation bill through the back door, which had been rejected previously.
Well, again, that's their argument. And honestly speaking, I wouldn't know the intention of government because I'm not in government or part of government. But again, we must start always from the point of regulation. In the paper that I wrote, I had suggested that the church ought to have been self-regulating before. And pardon me if you don't mind, I could refer to a scripture in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 31. It says, Paul says to the church, judge so that you may not be judged. So if we were doing some things or all the things we were supposed to do right as a body, I don't think we'll be where we're at. But there's been a lot of issues in social media, people making noise, even insulting men of God because they don't even know the facts. It's because we expose ourselves. We simply need to just do the right thing and then move simultaneously with the amendment of the section. In answer to your question on the comparison between the UK Charity Act, Charity Commission, Act, and this one, they are completely different provisions. In the UK Act, it's much more detailed, and there are a lot of safeguards that are in there. Besides, in the UK, there is, and I say this without due respect to our people and our fellow Nigerians, there is a lot of maturity by public officials in the UK in the implementation of any law. And because they have good supervision, it's difficult for them to use the law to oppress an individual or group of people. And so to that extent, theirs is much, much, much better than ours. We have cases of abuses of power using one law or the other. It's not just the CAMA. Any law can be used to oppress your opponent if you have a bad leader or whoever it is the leader operating the particular law. So that's quite possible. But that is not the answer to saying jettison the law altogether. That's why I suggested, and I'm fully for an amendment, and we can get a lot from the UK and other jurisdictions as to how to ensure that in the implementation of CAMA, the RG or whoever stands in that office or the commission cannot use it arbitrarily. That I am 100% for.
Well, Markwell has some questions for you as well. Markwell, go ahead.
It would seem then that you are, very concerned about the concerns that the PFN and CAMA, most especially, has, they've raised with this particular matter, the issue of trust. Because for some people, they say underlying this all is that issue of trust. They claim that there is a breakdown of trust between church officials, even the NGOs. So, for instance, we're also seeing Serap complain about this law, threatening that if it's not reversed, they will go to court in 30 days or thereabout. The presidency has responded to say the place you should go to complain about that is the National Assembly. So that issue of trust, how best do you think it could be addressed?
Excuse me. Thank you very much. Apparently, there is mutual distrust, if you like, between the parties. That's the leadership of the church and the government on the law. And obviously, I'm not qualified to speak to that because I don't sit with the leadership, so I don't know what the mistrust is all about. But there is one from the exchanges of both parties, clearly. Now that we established that there is mistrust between both parties, there is no other way than to do it by dialogue. We just need to sit down. The leadership of the church should appoint a group of leaders representing them, maybe their lawyers, and then government and its lawyers, the National Assembly and its lawyers, where all the parties can lay their cards on the table and discuss it. And hoping that government will also see reasons with them where they have the concerns and do something about it. It's the only way. You just have to go to the table to discuss. Well, perhaps when it comes to the amendment of the law, it will be more of the National Assembly, because presidency, as I know the law to be, under a presidential system, cannot amend it. It has to be the National Assembly. But I'm sure if government also sees reasons with the leadership of the church, they can probably also sit down with them to say, how can we resolve this? If indeed no hidden agenda is planned.
So would you say that if we're to go by the response that government has given Serap so far, would you say that they seem inclined to take a second look at the law that has already been signed by the president?
Is that question by the National Assembly or by the presidency? Sorry, I'm not sure I got that question.
So
who would be prepared to take a second look?
Exactly. So that's where the issue is now, because all three arms of government will certainly claim, will claim that they're acting within their powers, and who precisely should they be addressing this to? I'm hammering more on what Serap has said, because there seems to be one organization that has addressed a specific arm of government. They have said, Mr. President, take back your assent, otherwise we go to court. Mr. President or the presidency has responded saying, no, well, you're addressing the wrong body. We think you should go to the National Assembly. So now that you have said that, all the lawyers of the different arms of government should come to table, I'm asking, do you see that inclination given by going by the response that the presidency has given to an organization like SERAP?
Now, once a president under a presidential system assents to a law, I don't think he can withdraw his assent. He cannot. The law can only be repealed or amended. In which case, if you have appropriate conditions for either, but that has to be made to the National Assembly. The president cannot withdraw his assent. He cannot, as far as I'm aware, under the law. He cannot. But my earlier suggestion is for them to sit together. This is, if you like, doctrine of necessity, if you like, so that there will be peace. The three parties can sit together. But in terms of who does what, is the National Assembly. They made the law. They can amend it. Don't forget that the CAMA has always been in existence. It was just amended by the National Assembly. So they can always amend it. And that amendment can mean we're taking out section X or Y and we're replacing it with section Z, whatever it is. But the presidency cannot, under the law, as I understand it. But
in other words,
yes.
In other words, the people that, whoever is aggrieved should be addressing their complaints to should be members of the National Assembly. Do I get you correctly?
That is my view. That is my view.
There's a section, there's something that you quoted earlier, Mr. Atoyebi, that I thought, needed a little more. I think there may be a need for some elucidation. Well, you said that the powers of the Registrar General are so much, but I don't know how really powerful he is, especially as far as Section 839 goes, because there is nothing the Commission can do to suspend the trustees of an NGO without the court. The first line says the Commission may by order, and that order, according to subsection 2, will come from the court. And if the court does not agree that the Commission should suspend the trustees, is it possible for the Commission to go ahead?
That is a problem with the drafting. I'm trying to open to it, but my recollection of Section 839, which empowers the RG to suspend, I think with the greatest respect to the drafters, is a little bit inelegant and it's ambiguous. There is a section that says, that's a part of it that says it needs to go to court. But there is a subsection, I think the earlier one, doesn't seem to be quite clear as to whether he exercises certain powers on his own or with reference to the court. It is not clear. And if if it becomes a legal issue, my understanding is it can go either way. In other words, he might first exercise that power and then goes to court for certain other consequential release. So I do not think, somebody will read it and say exactly what you said, which is you can't do this except you go to court. But even if he's going to go to court, he's going to do it ex parte. He's going to do it behind the back of the church or whatever organization he wants to deal with. So really, does it really make a lot of difference? Whether it is in his power alone or in conjunction with the court, it's still ex parte. So it's still open to an abuse, except certain conditions have been laid before, much more deeper or rather wider than we have before he can exercise that power. I think that's where the fear or concern is, and I cannot but agree more with that concern.
Another concern, really, another concern is the interim manager or manager's part. And the question for a lot of people is, does the law specify where they can be drawn from, or someone from anywhere can actually be appointed as an interim manager, or in another case, managers?
Well, again, that's one of the areas that I said is a bit opaque, if you like. The law hasn't stated who it would be. I think probably for qualification, but whether it could be someone who doesn't come from that constituency. For instance, if you were going to suspend the trustees of a church and appoint an interim manager, first of all, the manager, whoever it may be, would be overseeing the administration, nothing spiritual. The administration, the finance, whilst whatever is going on in court or wherever, not the spiritual. And to that extent, of course, if you find someone who is an antagonist to the faith, that could cause a lot of trouble. I agree entirely. So that is an area that we must look at with a view to strengthening the institution so that we don't bring someone who's already nursing a grudge against that particular association or organization to come and act as an interim manager. And within the period that he acts, he can destroy the whole thing. So there is concern, there is genuine concern in that area. We need to specify the qualifications, including whether they should be part of the constituency. When I say constituency, I'm not saying if you were taking action against Church A, that the manager should come from Church A. No. I'm not saying that. But at least get someone who's known to be an antagonist to the church.
All right, then. Several other sections, including 8422 as well, but we can't go into that today. But we do thank you for talking to us this morning, Mr. Femi Atoyebi, Senior Advocate of Nigeria.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. We're back in a moment. Please stay with us.